It is 9 o'clock at night in Jerusalem, and the streets near the old city are filling with people who have already taken off their shoes. Some walk barefoot over stone that never warmed today. Their clothes are torn, not by accident, on purpose, before they left home. They have not eaten since last night, and they will not eat again until tomorrow after sunset. By the western wall, thousands are already sitting on the ground. Low, the way you sit when someone in your family has just died. In a sense, someone has. This will keep building for hours. The real peak, the moment the grief becomes almost unbearable to witness, will not come until just before dawn. This happens every single year, on the same date, and it has happened for almost 2,000 years without missing once. Ask most people what this night is, and they will tell you it marks the fall of a temple, maybe two. They are not wrong. But they are only telling you the surface, because buried inside this one date is a pattern that was written down in detail centuries before any of it happened. Tonight, we are going to open that pattern, and once you see it, you will not look at a calendar the same way again. They call it Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the month of Av. On the Hebrew calendar, it never moves. Every year, the 9th of Av, without exception, laid over the calendar most of us use, the date shifts from year to year, which is exactly why the rest of the world never notices it arrive. The people fasting tonight are not mourning something vague. They are mourning something specific, dated, documented, the way you would document a crime. On the 9th of Av, in the year 586 before Christ, the armies of Babylon broke through the walls of Jerusalem, entered the Temple of Solomon, and burned it to the ground. Priests who had served there their entire lives watched fire take the one place they believed could never fall. The survivors were marched into exile, in chains, toward a country they had only ever heard of in stories. Then, centuries later, on the 9th of Av, the year 70, a different empire came, Rome, and Rome burned the second temple on the exact same date. Two empires, 600 years apart, two armies that shared no language, no religion, no memory of each other, no way of coordinating even if they had wanted to. And somehow, the same 24 hours. If it stopped there, you could call it coincidence and move on with your life. It does not stop there. In 1290, on the 9th of Avi, the Jews of England were expelled from the only country many of them had ever known. In 1306, the 9th of Avars, France, expels its Jews. In 1492, the 9th of Avi, Spain signs the decree that empties an entire kingdom of its Jewish population. An expulsion so total that it reshaped the Jewish world for the next 500 years. Portugal follows soon after. Then, on the 9th of Av in 1914, a war begins. The one history will call the First World War, the war that lays the ground, piece by piece, for the second. Because it was on the 9th of Av in 1941, in the middle of that second war, that a plan was formally approved, a plan with a name that sounds almost administrative. The final solution, gas chambers, extermination camps, everything the world now calls the Holocaust traces back, on paper, to a decision made on this date. By the time it ended, 1 out of every 3 Jews on earth was dead. Not in one country, everywhere Jewish people had made a life. Historians have a word for events that repeat like this on the same date, generation after generation, empire after empire. Coincidence. The people fasting tonight have a different word for it. A wound that keeps reopening, on schedule, as if something, somewhere, is keeping count. Watch the crowd long enough and you start to see the shape underneath the grief. No leather shoes tonight. In the ancient world, leather meant comfort, and comfort is the first thing this kind of mourning refuses. No washing, no oil on the skin, nothing that softens the body while the fast is doing its work. 25 hours without food, without water. The kind of fast that empties a person all the way down until there's nothing left to distract them from what they came here to feel. And they sit low, on the ground, on small stools, because in this tradition, that is how you sit when you are grieving someone close. Tonight, an entire nation sits that way, together, for a building that stopped standing 2,000 years ago and is still, somehow, mourned like a person. On one side of the wall, the women stand with their faces pressed toward the stone, some of them weeping without trying to hide it, without needing to. On the other side, the men read aloud from a book written for exactly this night. The Book of Lamentations. 5 poems composed by the prophet Jeremiah after he stood and watched the first temple burn with his own eyes. As the night deepens, the reading does not stop. It moves from voice to voice, low and steady. The same words repeated across a crowd that grows larger with every hour. Listen to what Jeremiah wrote, and it stops sounding like ancient literature. It starts sounding like a voice already inside tonight's crowd. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. For these things I weep. My eyes flow with tears. A comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. He was not writing poetry for its own sake. He was recording exactly what this scene looks like. 2,500 years before it would happen again. Tonight, in front of you, word for word, stone for stone. Jeremiah did not only witness the fall of the temple, he warned it was coming years before a single stone fell, and almost no one wanted to hear it. He told the people to remember Shiloh, a city most of them had already forgotten, the place where the tabernacle once stood for centuries before it was destroyed and swallowed by time, until almost nobody remembered it had existed at all. Go now to my place that was in Shiloh, he said, speaking the words of God, and see what I did to it, and I will do to this house what I did to Shiloh. They did not believe him. Jerusalem was the holy city. It held the temple. It could not fall. That was the thinking that filled the streets right up until the moment it did. Then the Babylonians came and did exactly what Jerusalem had called impossible. Centuries later, a second temple stood in its place, more magnificent than the first, until it too fell on the 9th of Av. To a different empire entirely, the people did not stop hoping for a third. Decades after Rome's destruction, they rose up one final time, a rebellion led by a man named Bar Kokhba, fighting for one thing only, enough freedom to rebuild what fire had taken. For 3 years, it looked almost possible. Coins were minted for a nation that did not yet exist again. Then Rome crushed it completely. And the final massacre of that rebellion came, once again, on the 9th of Av Easter. A year later, almost to the day, something else happened, something written down nearly 1,000 years earlier by a prophet named Micah. Long before Rome existed as an empire at all. Zion shall be plowed as a field, he wrote. Jerusalem shall become a heap of ruins, and the mountain of the house a wooded height. The Roman governor over Judea gave the order himself. He had the Temple Mount plowed, literally plowed the way you plow a field before planting something new in the ground. He was not farming. He was erasing, clearing the past the way you clear a field before building on top of it. And that is exactly what Rome did next. On the ruins of Jerusalem, they raised a pagan city and gave it a new name, Aelia Capitolina. On the mount where the Holy of Holies had stood, they built a temple to Jupiter. In the city itself, a temple to Aphrodite. Idols everywhere the temple used to be. 2 temples, an exile, a rebellion, a plowed field, a pagan city, all on the same short window of days, all written down by name centuries in advance. A prophecy is easy to dismiss when it stands alone. It is harder to dismiss when it keeps arriving on schedule, generation after generation, on the same 9 days of the same month. Most people who come here to pray believe the Western Wall is the closest they can get to where the Holy of Holies once stood. They are not entirely right. There is a passage most visitors never find. A narrow tunnel that runs past a green gate no Jew or Christian is permitted to enter. Because on the other side, a few hundred feet away, is the exact ground where the Ark of the Covenant once rested. Walk through that tunnel, you reach a stretch of wall almost nobody has heard of. They call it the Small Western Wall. Same ancient stone, same original structure, but standing even closer to the place itself than the crowded plaza everyone already knows. Most nights, it is empty. Some nights, completely empty. Not one person, not one voice, just old stone and silence. Tonight, for once, it is full. Shoulder to shoulder, voices overlapping in prayer, candlelight moving against a wall that has stood since before Rome had an emperor. And standing there, you start to understand why so many people in this crowd are carrying flags with a strange symbol printed on them. A building that does not exist yet, drawn in gold thread against the dark cloth. There is a project, quiet but real, built entirely around a 3rd temple. The vessels for its service have already been made and are kept, waiting. The blueprints have already been drawn, down to the smallest detail. What has not happened, what has no date attached to it, is the construction itself on the mount, where the first 2 once stood and fell on this very night. It is not a subject people discuss lightly, here or anywhere else. It touches politics. It touches religion. It touches a great deal of disagreement about what is supposed to happen next, and who is supposed to make it happen. But this much is certain, watching this crowd tonight. Those who come here, night after night, generation after generation, are not only praying about the past, they are praying towards something they believe has not happened yet. And maybe closer than anyone standing here tonight is willing to say out loud. Read the Book of Lamentations closely, and you will notice something the crowd tonight already knows by heart, even if they could not explain it out loud. It does not have one movement, it has 3. The first is the lament itself, raw grief over what was lost. The city, the temple, the people scattered into exile one more time. The second is harder to sit with. It is the reckoning, an honest look at why the fall happened at all, at the failures that opened the door and let it in. And the third, the part almost nobody quotes, is restoration. The book does not end in ashes. It ends reaching toward a promise that has not yet run out. Restore us to yourself, O Lord, that we may be restored. Renew our days as of old. Phil, stand here tonight, and you can feel all 3 movements happening at once, in the same square, in real time, layered on top of each other like the stones of the wall itself. The grief is not performance. Watch anyone's face for more than a few seconds, and you will see that for yourself. The reckoning is not comfortable either. It asks this crowd to remember not only what was done to them, but what they did to open the door. But the third movement is here too. Quietly, underneath the mourning, almost impossible to notice unless you already know to look for it. Because in 1948, after nearly 2,000 years without a homeland, after an exile that outlasted every empire that ever caused it, a nation stood up and declared, against every reasonable expectation, that it existed again. Not a metaphor, not a spiritual idea passed down as comfort for people who had lost everything else. An actual return from every corner of the earth to the same ground where all of this began. The restoration is not finished. Nobody standing at that wall tonight would tell you it is. But it started. And once something like that starts, after 2,000 years of silence, it does not simply stop on its own. So the next time you picture a crowd on the ground, barefoot, fasting, reading a 2,500-year-old book of grief out loud into the dark, remember that the very same book, in the very same breath, is also a book of return. That is the part almost nobody tells you about the 9th of Aviv. If this reached something in you, stay with this channel. There is more of this waiting, and it is not going anywhere. Share it with 5 people who need to hear it, not because it is content to pass along, but because some of them are already asking the same questions this night just answered. Leave a comment and be honest in it. Tell us what stayed with you longest, and tell us what you want to understand next. Because there is always another date, another pattern, another piece of the same ancient, unfinished story.